What's up, everyone? I'm Jackie.
And I'm Lindsay.
And we are Women Leaders in Sports Medicine.
Here to help you grow your game and own your game.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Women Leaders in Sports Medicine. We're stoked to have Brittany Wiebe on with us today. Hey, Brittany.
Hey, guys.
She's the Astros minor league strength and conditioning coach, and we're super excited to dive into your journey. How you doing today?
Great. I'm so excited to be talking with you guys today. Thanks for having me on. Let's get after it.
Of course. Just because it's been such unprecedented times, we've just been starting the podcast with kind of what has this time off been like for you? I know everything in the MLB has been ebbing and flowing, to say the least. So,
yeah, absolutely. So it is definitely a difficult time and a frustrating time because right when we think the ball is going to start rolling again, then we get pushed back and delayed again. And so it's just a constant fight to try and open our complexes, but at the same time, like, health and safety comes first. So you have to be understanding of that.
For sure.
But I've learned pretty quickly that I'm not a desk person at all. And I need to get back to the gym and that one-on-one interaction with the guys as soon as possible, but still holding off for now.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, for everyone in the sports med field, I know it's been challenging. A lot of different people we've spoken with. You're so used to having that constant face-to-face interaction that it's weird not to have that. And it, as great as Zoom calls are and, you know, remote coaching and everything, it's definitely not the same. So hopefully, you know, things start to get back to relative normal and you guys can get back in the complex soon.
Whatever that new normal is, for sure.
Exactly.
Right. I definitely relate to the not wanting, like, the desk job stuff because, I mean, fortunately, like, for me, like, I'm back in clinic and treating patients, but at the beginning was very, like, telemedicine heavy. And my husband and I at the time we lived in, like, a very tiny, like, 1-bedroom apartment in downtown. And I was doing, like, all my work in the bedroom and he was doing all his work in the kitchen. And I was like, I cannot handle this anymore. So hopefully things get back to normal for you soon. But kind of moving into the major stuff in this podcast, we love to ask the question and start off the podcast with, what is your why of getting into strength and conditioning?
So I like to break my why down into how I personally became to love it and then how I became to love it once I actually became established and became a coach of the field. So initially I found my love for it. I'm from Canada, but I came to the States initially for basketball. I played at North Dakota State, and that's where I was kind of first introduced to strength conditioning. And so from there, that's just where I derived all my confidence from. Like, I just provided me this feeling that I didn't get on the court, but I got in the weight room, and I just thrived there. I enjoyed building up my teammates and just the competitiveness and getting after it day in, day out. And just the edge that it can provide you over a competitor was just like, I lived for that. So when I found out, like, holy crap, I can do this for a living, like, I can do this every day of my life, I just, like, totally bought in and I just chased it. And so the director there at the time, Jason Miller, he's amazing. So I kind of told him I was interested in doing it. And so I had a couple of internship opportunities while I was in North Dakota, and it just proved that for me, that love for that. And then, so from there, just following that drive and holding on to that passion, now my why is just, like, seeing that come to life with players. And, like, the best feeling in the world that it just never gets old is, like, working with an athlete day in, day out and just having them accomplish something that they didn't think they could do or they didn't believe in themselves that they could even achieve that or overcome something, and then knowing that you were that voice of reason for them, or you were that motivation for them, or you were the one who was just constantly pushing them and providing them that belief in themselves, because, like, until they believe in themselves, they're not going anywhere with it. So that's what drives me, and just having that opportunity, because especially with strength and conditioning, we're in such a rare position that we do have so much time with athletes. Like, more times than not, we have more one-on-one time than coaches have with their players. Like, we are just preseason, postseason, in season, we're just constantly with them and building to work towards their goals, and just having that time to help shape and mold them. Like, that's just what I love this job so much for.
That's awesome. I can see you are so passionate about what you do. I can tell, like, when you're talking about it, you're just so stoked the whole time. And I think, sometimes the best whys are because you relate to that feeling that you're giving that athlete, day in and day out. And, I agree the competitive edge and the confidence and the feeling you get in the weight room and how that translates to sport, and not just sport, but life as well, I think is an incredible feeling. And, I'm very fortunate too to be with my patients regularly, but you guys get to even be with your athletes even more. So to really see, the progression of your athlete, not only in their sport, but just in life. And I think that's such a cool thing to be able to do.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I freaking love it.
Yeah, I love that you.
I can tell.
Yeah, I love that you touched on two really important things. Kind of why you fell in love with it in the first place, but what keeps you going, day in and day out. With everything you're doing now. I think that's really important. I think it's easy to fall in love with something when you're doing it yourself, right? But I think it's sometimes the challenge is figuring out why you love doing what you do when technically you're not the one challenging yourself to get better. Right. I think that's awesome. And I love that you touched on the importance of kind of consistency. You get to see true growth in your athlete. I think, the society we kind of live in is a constant satisfaction. Everyone wants everything now. So it's
sure.
I'm sure. I mean, Jackie can relate too. It's so nice to see something pay off over time and see someone putting in that consistent effort and then seeing them realize what they're capable of. It's an amazing feeling. So I think that's awesome.
Okay.
Yeah. And jumping right into it, because I know you've had a ton of experience and I know our listeners are curious to hear about your mentors and your journey and everything. So can you tell us a little more about your journey into and through the field and maybe just some unique opportunities you've had along the way?
Yeah, for sure. So North Coast State is where I was first introduced to it. So I did an internship under Jason Miller, our director there, just to kind of get my feet wet and see what it's about. And then I also did an internship at one of the private sectors in North Dakota. It was called Sanford Power.
Nice.
And then from there, I was about to graduate, so you gotta put your time in. You gotta go find an internship. You gotta go, get that experience. I was okay, so who do I apply for? Where do I go? So I just had this long list of schools and just sending out my resume everywhere and trying to just even get my foot in the door. And then this is where connections come in handy. Is I applied for Clemson, and Coach Miller knew someone there, so he kind of sent over a text and was like, hey, can you look over her stuff for me? So I ended up getting a phone interview. No idea what the heck I was doing, but they must have seen something.
But you did it anyway, so that's what matters.
Yeah. So I got that summer internship at Clemson. I'm like, holy crap, I'm going to Clemson. This is wild.
Amazing.
And then, thanks. And then, so I drove there a couple weeks later. My parents drove down with me, found housing last minute. I'm sure you guys know how internships go. It's just a scramble to get situated, and then you're just diving right in. And then, so I got there and I was there for that summer internship. Amazing. Grew so much, was exposed to so much. They have every piece of sport tech under the sun, and I'm coming from a smaller D1. So I was like, whoa, what is all this stuff? So that was a super cool experience. And then actually didn't even complete my full summer there because Coach Rick Franz-Blau, he's the Olympic director, he still is at Clemson. He heard of a graduate assistant position that was opening with Mizzou, University of Missouri, and asked if I was interested in it. I was like, yeah. I didn't even know the next step. I was like, what's a GA? What do I do?
Yeah.
And so
I'll do it. I'm down. Let's go.
Yeah, I know. I was like, cool, let's do it. And so he's like, well, it's pretty unique. He's like, you're going to be working with Olympic sports, but you'll also be shared with football. And I was like, whoa, football? Yeah, let's do it. So it was super unique because usually you're Olympic or you're football, you're one or the other. Mm-hmm. In this instance, everyone was in the same weight room, like Olympic side and football side. And so I had the opportunity to work with both. So I was like, whoa, I need to do this. Like, this opportunity doesn't come around often. So I had like a couple phone interviews and then left my internship a few weeks early to go do an on-site. And that on-site was with the the football director of strength conditioning there, and he scared the shit out of me. Like, I was prepping all night for this like interview, because it was like an in his office one-on-one, and then I had to be out on the floor and show my coaching, all this. And so I actually called someone who's worked with him before, just like common connection. I was like, hey, what can I expect? He's like, I can't pray for this. It's going to be like the hardest interview you've ever done. And I was like,
oh my God.
Yeah. And
so like, thanks for the pep talk.
Yeah, exactly.
At least he was honest.
Yeah. So I just remember I was staying up all night. I had these cue cards because I love this guy to death, Mark Hutchlow, but he's like so particular, and he will ask you the finest details to see like how bad you want it, how much homework you've done. So he'll be like, what's the assistant coach of softball's name? What's swimming's record last year compared to this year? Like, every little thing he'll just test you. So I like had all these stats, all these coaches' names, like wins, losses, all this. I had studied all of that. And then I was able to answer like all of his questions. And then I did the floor thing and everything. And he didn't smile once during our interview. So I'm like, oh my God. And then I left, and then I got a call like a couple hours later saying that I got it and they wanted me there as soon as possible. So I was like stoked for that.
Amazing.
And then so that was a 2-year position because I did my master's there. And then after that, it was Coach Dylan Lawson. He was a hitting coach at Mizzou while I was there. He was with the Astros. He was heading back to the Astros, but he's now the hitting coordinator at the New York Yankees. Like, the guy's an absolute stud. He's such a good dude too. But he pulled me aside and he was like, hey, like, I really respect how like you can command a room and like how those football guys listen to you and respect you. He's like, I really want to put you in contact with one of my really good friends, Rachel Balkovec. So Rachel, everyone in the world knows Rachel.
Who's she? I'm just kidding. She's awesome.
She's now the freaking hitting coach of the Yankees. Like, yeah, insane. But she was with the Astros at the time, and she was the Latin American coordinator. So he's like, I want to just link you up with her. You both work in male dominant sports. Like, I just think it'd be a really cool experience for you to talk with her. I was like, oh my gosh, absolutely. And so I'm like listening to podcasts on her, like reading articles on her. And in my head, I'm like, oh my God, I was like, who am I? Like, I'm about to be reaching out to this all-star, and like, who even am I? I was like, so I'm just sitting there at this email, like looking at it for so long. Okay. I'm like, okay, screw it, send. So I send it. And she like sets a phone call with me like a few days later. I'm like, wow. And she was just like walking the beach in the Dominican on her off day. Like, I'm like, what the heck? Yeah. And so we must have talked for like an hour on the phone. Yeah. And just like hit it off immediately, and just like all of our pros and cons being in men's, well, not cons, but difficulties in men's sports and everything. We just like totally connected that way. And then, so she reached out to me like a week later and saying like, hey, I know you don't work with baseball and you might not necessarily be interested in baseball, but I want to let you know of this opportunity coming up. And it was a strength conditioning coach job down in the DR. And so I was like, whoa, yeah, tell me about it. And then, so she pretty much went off and told me every reason why I should not take the position. Like, if you guys know Rachel, just total black and white, like just wanted to lay it all out there. But then like the more she made it sound like a challenge, like the more I wanted it. I was like, I need to do this. This is so cool. Like, sign me up. So then it was just like, it took so long. It was like a 3-month interview process. And it just like felt like it went on forever. I like spoke with everyone, like our player development director, our head athletic trainer, our head of mental skills, like a couple people in strength conditioning. It was just like very well-rounded interview process. And then I still remember I got the call when I was between groups in Mizzou, and I just like shouted on the phone, like gave a little hoot and holler, and I was just so stoked. And then the guy who offered it to me was just like laughing. He's like, I've never gotten that response before. I was like, yes, let's go, let's do it. And then so I graduated that May, immediately came here to Florida to our spring training complex, had a couple weeks in extended spring training, and then I flew down to the DR and just like dove in head first. Had 2 seasons down there, and then now I'm based in Florida, overseeing and coordinating the DR. So it's been a whirlwind, but
yeah, that's awesome. Talk about a handful of different experiences, which I'm sure each have given you something to take away and like implement in what you're doing right now, right? Like even though you're working more with football and you're now in baseball, and yes, biomechanically and physiologically, I can't speak today, there's different demands of the sport, but I'm sure coaching wise, you were able to take a lot from Clemson and then Mizzou now into 100%. The DR and everything, which is awesome.
For sure.
I mean, I don't even know where to start. I have so many things I want to dive into. But I guess backpedaling a little bit, with Clemson. So that summer at Clemson and then going into Mizzou, what did you feel like helped set you apart for them to recognize or kind of refer you or have someone reach out to you like about Mizzou, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I think Clemson, it was a big deal to do with timing. Like it was just right time, right place. I was one of the couple interns who was transitioning into a GA role, and that's just where I was at with my path. And I guess Rick saw something in me that I just did a really good job for him and paid attention to the details, and he appreciated that and just showed my work ethic. So I was flattered that he even thought of me for the position. And then once I got to Mizzou, I guess it was just the confidence. I like fake it till you make it, right? Like he doesn't know us. Well, he does know now that I was scared shitless, but just the confidence that I had in myself and who I was. Like I didn't necessarily know who I was as a coach, or I didn't know what I wanted to do professionally at that point in my career, but just I was very confident in myself, and just my presence, I feel like, got me that position.
Definitely. I mean, the devil's in the details, it sounds like. We all hear it. And then just like trusting yourself and your gut.
Yeah. I think the other thing to kind of touch on that I think is important for like kind of people listening is how much preparation you put into your interview coming into Mizzou. Like, I think, you know, when I'm interviewing people or talking to people, like the more that like I am aware that they know like the ins and outs of where they're coming to or trying to come to, the more I can tell they actually want that position. And so I think that's like also a really valuable lesson in just like making shifting points in your career and being prepared for it. Not only, words, I can't talk to you today, on top of, you know, exuding that confidence and honestly faking it till you make it. I've done that plenty of times myself as well.
Yeah, for sure.
But I'm curious too, kind of moving into some of your experience with specific sports, you know, working in football, a lot of young women out there, you know, that might be a career aspiration for them, but it's challenging to get into that realm, or they're nervous to work with that population. What are maybe some pieces of advice on, you know, athlete buy-in working in such a, you know, bro environment?
Right. So that's the tricky part, because obviously you do have being a female working against you right away, especially in a male dominant sport. And in my case, I was working alongside a lot of athletes who were same age as me, if not a couple years older. And so there's just that line that you have to draw right away and let them know like what you're there for, and that you hold yourself to this standard and you have these expectations of them and you're going to hold them to those. And then once that's firm in place and you put in time with them and they realize like this girl is serious about her job, like she's here for a reason, she's here to help me, then that's when you can kind of open up a little more, and then I can show my more like playful, loving side and like have more fun with the guys. But I feel like if you let that side go right out of the gate, then it's so hard to earn that respect or backpedal back. Whereas if you come out solid, firm, let them know right away, and then you build those connections, build that trust, and then you can open up after that. Because I've just found that it's just, you can't go back once you have that set image of you.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing to touch on. Not only, the idea of being like a female in a male dominant sport, but also working with athletes who are the same age as you, like people you might go and like hang out with on the weekend. I think
exactly. Yeah.
That's like a thing people don't always realize is also a challenge coming into working with an athletic population is, those people might see you as a peer instead of someone that's like trying to like get them better or stronger or, exert
100%.
different area. And so I think that's a good piece of advice in the idea of like coming into the environment and letting them know, like, this is what's up, this is who I am. And then slowly letting that kind of like playful side come out too. And early in my career, I had a hard time with that sometimes too, because there's just some people that you just get along with really well. And it's really hard to be like, no, I'm serious. Like, what I mean? So I think like the more you practice it, the more like working in that environment isn't really that hard. It's just, letting them know this is who I am, this is what I'm going to do, and we'll hang out later sort of thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Or even just personality wise, especially, in any field, athletic training, strength and conditioning, physical therapy, etc. We're all very, for the most part, friendly people, right? And we truly care about the person in front of us. And sometimes the person in front of us doesn't have a lot of people who truly care about them. So like you said, it's a hard balance of one, earning their respect and letting them know you care about them and that you want them to get better, but also drawing that line of, I'm here to facilitate you being the best you can be. I'm not necessarily here to be your friend. I want to be friendly. I want to, make sure we're all on the same team.
Yeah, exactly.
So, it's definitely a hard boundary to set sometimes. But like you said, I think it's important in the beginning to state so everyone knows like who you are, kind of what your values are. And then from there, you can maybe let your guard down a little bit depending on the situation and whatnot. I think that's super 100%. Important to touch on. I'd also love to touch on a little bit the first time you were connected with Rachel, because I think for our listeners and even Jackie and I reaching out, to some of these women, we have times where we're like, man, like, what have I done to be able to connect with this person, right? It's like imposter syndrome sets in. And sometimes you have to take a step back and think like, wait a minute, I've done a pretty decent job at where I am so far. I heard a great analogy, not to get on a tangent, but it's like you have a cookie jar. And every time you do something that's big or little, but that has helped you get to where you are, you kind of like put that cookie in your cookie jar. So when you're starting to feel,
I love that.
Like, you're starting to doubt yourself a little bit, you can like take a cookie from your cookie jar. So like, for example, when you were talking about reaching out to Rachel, you're kind of like, oh, who am I to like email her? You just did 2 years at Mizzou. You did an internship at Clemson. You worked with football and Olympic training. Like, heck yeah, of course you should, feel comfortable reaching out to her, right? Easier said than done. So I guess just with networking and reaching out to someone where it might be a little uncomfortable, what is just some advice you might give someone like coming up in the field for reaching out to someone new?
For reaching out, I would just say, send it. Like, what do you have to lose? Mm-hmm. Obviously, first and foremost, make sure you're not overstepping, that you're being respectful and you're reaching out to them in a professional manner and not playing it off as unprofessional or just tossing a message over like your friends or anything. So there is that like standard that you need to hold yourself to. But at the same time, like, what do you have to lose? Just reach out to them, and you'll never know until you do it. And so just have confidence in yourself and knowing what you're trying to achieve, and like, what's the worst that can happen? Just send it.
I love it. Send it.
Send it.
Send it.
Tagline of this podcast. Just send it.
Yeah, right.
No, but that's so true. I think a lot of the times we get in our own heads about, the next steps we're trying to take in our career, if that is reaching out to someone. And I think just taking the time to be like, the worst they're going to say is no, or you're going to get a no reply. And also understanding like, it's not personal sometimes. Like if you get a no reply and you're reaching out to someone who's like all the way up here in the world, like they're busy, like maybe they just missed it, try again later or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Be persistent as well.
Yeah, exactly. Persistence is totally key. Now kind of going in, past your journey a little bit, I know you are going into a second master's. Have you had any shift in your kind of goals throughout your career? You talked about like having 2 whys. Have things kind of shifted and changed as you've had so many different experiences, in Olympic lifting and in football and baseball now? What has kind of guided you to want to get that second master's, and what are you doing your master's in?
So the opportunity came, it's with Satanta College, based out of Ireland. And they're actually using our facility and our resources in West Palm Beach at our spring training center. And so they offered us up a couple of scholarships, and then I was offered one of them. So I was so stoked. I'm not going to turn that down. So it's a master's in science in performance coaching. It's totally well-rounded, like every aspect of the field, like nutrition, sports science, application, just whatever you can think of. It's just, they're amazing. And I'm so in love with the course thus far. I'm about halfway through it. But my goals, I'd say they've changed and they've evolved since initially graduating and being in kind of that intern GA role. Because I would have initially said like my goals are based on my title or what team I'm with or where I'm going or who I'm working for. But now my goals are more so based out of who can I surround myself? Can I be in a room full of the best coaches, the best athletes in the world? And can I be in a position that challenges me and scares the crap out of me every day and forces me to get better and is just so exciting? And am I in a room where I can like positively impact people and lives? Like that's just my ultimate goal. So I wouldn't say I'm necessarily chasing like a title or a team or anything along those lines anymore, but just rather chasing that aspect of impact and just who I surround myself with rather than the title.
I think it's interesting when we ask these types of questions, because that's a common theme in the growth of a sports medicine professional. Is like at the beginning, our motivations are very external, or chasing those titles like you talked about, or getting to that position that everybody envies, but then morphing into like a whole new set of goals that are much more meaningful to you. And I love that you, throughout like your career, you've always like, it seems like tried to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. Like you've always like thought the challenge and the competition to like make you better. But at the end of the day, like you're making yourself better because you want to have a better and stronger impact on your athletes and the people around you. So I think that's a pretty cool thing to see, like as far as, shifting in goals and ideals. Pretty cool.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh man,
definitely.
Awesome. Yeah, like Jackie said, I think that's awesome, and there's a lot to be said about surrounding yourself with people who you hold in really high regard, but that also like facilitate you to be better and not necessarily like bring you down. So I think that's awesome. So you've had a wealth of experience, it sounds like. So from all these opportunities and all these experiences, have you felt like there have been any obstacles along the way? And maybe obstacles isn't the right word. We might have to think of a way to change this question, but I guess just things that along the way that were a little challenging and how you overcame them.
Yeah, so off the top of my head, not to be a broken record, but being a female in a male dominant field and a male dominant sport, there's just always going to be those questions and preconceived notions about you, and it's just going to be that constant proving yourself. Like, you could have done something amazing, earned your players' trust, done all this, but then there still might be like that one or two staff member that you just haven't proved to them yet. You just constantly have to prove to them. And there are other instances where it just tests you, and you never really know how to react to them until they happen to you. So like, for example, it was like my first year at Mizzou. I was still getting to know the players. I just got there, and then a player came by. I was like working on my computer, and he just like dropped his number on my desk and like started to walk away. I'm like, well, what the frick do I do? Like, what do I do about this? Like, this is the first time this is happening to me. What do I do? And then, so out of instinct, it was just like, I looked him in the eye, I like grabbed the paper, crumpled it, and then shot it in the trash across the
that
office.
Makes a statement.
And
yeah.
I know, I was like, oh, and then after I did it, I was like, oh my God, did I just do that? Like, where did that come from? But it's just like, until you're in the moment, you never know how you're going to handle something. And you're always so scared that if something does get handled incorrectly, like that could be it, you know, like that could be your reputation. Like, so it's things like that are a constant struggle. And just like, so this is like a touchy subject, because it's like something that we're constantly dealing with, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like, male coaches, they might have the like opportunity to go out for lunch with a player, for drinks with a player, and like if we ever have that opportunity, like, it's not perceived that way at all. Or I've had to turn down lunches, or I've had to do that. I'm just like, because even if we do have a super good relationship and people know like we have a really strong player coach relationship, like it will never sit right with everyone. And so there's just things like that you always have to tiptoe around. And yeah, so I'd say those are the hardest challenges for me that I've experienced in the field so far.
Yeah, definitely. And we've heard similar stories to that as well, that unfortunately, at least for now, the perception of that is it is unprofessional. And at the end of the day, our job is to be professionals. Yeah. So you have to turn down things like that. And like you said, you never know how you're going to react until something happens. Yeah. So like you said, I mean, I think you handled that well. Yeah.
Appreciate
made
it.
a statement. Yeah.
You handled it in a boss way. So.
Yeah. And then it also worked out because at the same time, you're like trying not to ruin that relationship or how they got to hate you, right? Because you still need to reach him and help him throughout his collegiate career. And so doing that, like, he just like kind of walked away with a little smirk on his face, and then we like it was never spoken about ever again. So it's just like finding that balance of like, how do I let this guy know what I'm about, but how do I also not lose like that relationship with him professionally?
Yeah, and I think that's good for listeners to hear too, because again, you can think of situations in your head that might happen to you and run through different scenarios of what might be the best way to handle it, but you never know how you're going to handle it until it happens. Like, great example, I interviewed and was accepted at a clinic in Southern California that is high-end, high sports performance. And at the very end of my interview, my boss had said, or my to-be boss, if I had accepted the job, had said, oh, you know, by the way, for our high-end athletes, like, we sometimes do home visits. And I said, okay, yeah, like, no big deal. For how much they're paying, like, I would expect that. Yeah. And he's like, and like, just so you know, like, the customer's always right. So I just want to make sure we're on the same page with that. And I had, until that happened, I was on board. I couldn't wait to get started. It was like my dream job at the time, right? And then as soon as he said that, all I could think was like, God forbid something happened. Would you have my back? And that's all I could keep thinking. Long story short, didn't end up there because of that and a couple other reasons. But it's just, like you said, you never know how you're going to react until something happens. So it's good to go with your gut, but also maybe think through these things in advance. So I appreciate you sharing all that with listeners, because I'm sure Jackie has similar instances of things happening.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy, like you said, it's a touchy subject. And, you know, a goal here is to make it not a touchy subject anymore. And, you know, young women feel comfortable with asking questions with people who have gone through these scenarios before, so that when that situation happens, they do feel a little bit more prepared, because when that happens, when those incidents happen, it feels like almost very surreal. You're like, you expect it in a way, but when it happens in the moment, you're like, I weirdly didn't expect that to happen. So you end up going with your gut. So yeah, I mean, thank you for like starting to share those experiences. And I know it's a touchy subject, but it's an important one to talk about.
Absolutely, for sure.
Yeah, but kind of, you know, bridging things up a little bit, you've had a lot of amazing experiences and lots of good little like taglines, like just send it and getting uncomfortable. But what kind of, you know, what are some pieces of advice you would give someone that are coming up in the field, whether it's someone, you know, a young female strength and conditioning coach that wants to get into football, or, you know, AT or PT hoping to get into sports medicine? What are those pieces of advice you would give to people?
I would say pride in the details. Like every little thing matters. And whether you think it's being overlooked or no one sees the work that you're doing behind the scenes, or that piece of garbage you picked up that you walked by and no one saw, like there's always eyes on you and people pick up on everything. So just taking pride in the details and doing the little things exceptionally well will help you down the road earn more responsibility, and just doing an amazing job at whatever job you're given. And that will help carry you so far. And just another big one for me is just be a joy to be around. Like, you may not be the most knowledgeable yet, or you might have the least experience out of everyone, but if you're a joy to be around and they know you're passionate about it and you're willing to learn, you're willing to do like whatever it takes, like people will take you on. Like, they love that. They want someone around that they want to be around, that like you're likable and they know you're passionate about it. And so I would say those are like the two biggest things for me.
I like that. I think that hasn't been something we've talked about, is just like your attitude, like in your environment a little bit. I think, you know, each area that you go into, they're trying to create a culture. And if you don't fit in that culture, even if you are the most brilliant strength and conditioning coach, athletic trainer, PT, whatever, you don't fit there. Like, people aren't going to want you in that community. So I think, you know, sometimes in the midst of being like a new person coming in, sometimes I think people don't realize that they're like having like a bit of an attitude, or like, you know, like they're frustrated. So they're coming off a little like sharper, but also like remembering, hey, like I came into this because I love it, and you should want to show that. So I think that's a great kind of thing to touch on that we haven't really talked about very much. And I also like that you talked about like, you know, looking at the details and not being afraid to do, you know, I guess the dirty work, like, you know, helping out around the clinic or helping out around the strength and conditioning room with things that you aren't expected to do. People definitely do notice that. So two solid, you know, pieces of advice.
Yeah, I agree with Jackie. We haven't really talked about the energy you bring to a room, and that's really important. Like you said, people want to be around people who exude good energy. But also what I love that you touched on is doing an amazing job at your job. I think with this field, again, we can sometimes get caught up in like, I need to be the head director of performance. And if I'm not that, then, you know, that sucks. And then you get all in your head and frustrated and whatnot. But, you know, sometimes starting at the bottom and, like you said, doing an amazing job at that job will not only show so much about your character, but probably progress you a lot further in the long run than you think. Whether it's cleaning tables in the athletic training room because you're the assistant athletic trainer and right now there's no patients to see, or same thing with being a physical therapist, or if you're an assistant strength coach, like helping the head strength coach out more than what's expected.
Right.
So I think that's amazing. And that's great advice for someone coming up in the field.
Beauty.
Awesome. Well, Brittany, thank you so much for taking some time out of your Sunday to, hang out with us a little bit, share your story, share your trials, share your, triumphs, all that good stuff. And we're excited to have you part of the network.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. Like, I think what you guys are doing is amazing. And it's one of those things where it's like, how has no one created this platform yet? Or how is this not out there yet? But it's never done until someone does it. So thank you to you guys for finally doing this. I think it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
we're stoked to be a part of it.
We're definitely excited. We've met a lot of really amazing women. I feel motivated like all the time right now.
I know, right?
So we're definitely excited to continue to grow it and, have you be a part of it.
For sure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks.
Woo!
Thank you for listening to the Women Leaders in Sports Medicine podcast. This podcast is for you to take a step closer to your dreams. Visit www.womenleadersinsportsmedicine.com to join our roundtables, learn about our mentorship programs, and to let us know what you want to hear. Have a great day, and remember, it's your time to lead.